That is all in for this evening. The Rachel Maddow Show starts right now. Good evening, Rachel.
I'm already watching you and Paul Wolfowitz on a loop in my mind, and it's not stopping, Chris. That was amazing.
It was something.
Well put. Thanks to you at home as well for joining us this hour. There's lots going on in the world, including huge whole swaths of America worrying right now about whether a rather large and powerful storm is going to keep us all from getting home to wherever home is for the Thanksgiving holiday this year. Weather is supposed to be random, but the god of supposedly random weather really does like to give us storms on the heaviest travel days before Thanksgiving. Every year, and this year, it turns out, is no exception. We've got more on that coming up. Also, the iconic political video, Yes We Can, from the 2008 campaign, that is now translating to other countries' politicians in very unexpected other countries. We've got that story and some of the tape coming up. And the Obama administration makes a big move late in the day today to stop the Sheldon Adelsons and Foster Freezes and Koch brothers of the world from trying to buy the next presidential election as well. They made the change without Congress today. They announced the first part of it today. And if you know any ideologically motivated billionaires, and today they seemed like they were in a really bad mood, this policy change might be why. There's a lot going on in the news this Tuesday of Thanksgiving week. But we start with the United States Supreme Court and the court's decision to weigh in on the conservative war on birth control. It's hard to even say the words war on birth control, but as long as we as a country are going to use the idea of war as an allegory for things that are endangered because of a concerted political effort against them, then yes, the conservative war on birth control is a thing. And right now, it is hitting the big time in Republican politics.
One of the things I will talk about that no president has talked about before is I think, the dangers of contraception in this country. The whole sexual libertine idea. And many in the Christian faith have said, well, that's okay. I mean, contraception's okay. It's not okay because it's a license to do things in the sexual realm that is counter to how things are supposed to be.
Contraception is not okay. Former Pennsylvania Senator Rick Santorum may now just be a guy whose Christmas movie about a Kindle is doing very poorly at the box office. But last year, Rick Santorum proved that a guy who once had been chased out of big-time politics because of his hardcore social conservatism, a man who was famous as the man-on-dog guy, a man who was famous only for his anti-gay and anti-abortion and anti-contraception beliefs, and who had lost his U.S. Senate seat because of it. Last year, he proved that you only need to sit out a few years before the Republican Party would be ready to have you back after that sort of defeat. Before that party was once again looking for a fire and brimstone type as its potential savior. Rick Santorum effectively came in second in the race for the Republican presidential nomination last year, losing only to Mitt Romney. And at the time that happened, it was seen as more of an indication of Mitt Romney's good fortune to be running against such a weak field of other potential nominees. But you know what? It was also the sign of a broader embrace on the right of Rick Santorum brand culture war conservatism. And that includes being against contraception. About 5 years ago, an anti-abortion group called the American Life League started organizing protests around the theme of the pill kills. The pill as in the birth control pill. In 2008, their theme was the birth control pill kills babies. In 2009, their theme was the birth control pill kills women. In 2010, their theme was the birth control pill kills the environment. That was an interesting take on it. In 2011, they decided that the birth control pill kills marriage. So yeah, it's an annual thing. Every year they say the birth control pill is responsible for killing some other thing. And they hold the protests every year at the same time of year. They always hold them in the first week of June. And that is specific and on purpose. They hold their protests in the first week of June because June 7th is the anniversary of a Supreme Court decision called Griswold v. Connecticut. The anti-abortion movement ties its protests every year to the anniversary of Roe v. Wade. The part of the anti-abortion movement that is also anti-contraception instead picks the anniversary of that Griswold decision because they disagree with the Griswold ruling. And the Griswold ruling said that states can't ban birth control. The anti-birth control people think that ruling was a travesty. The states should be able to ban birth control, and they should ban birth control. They think that contraception should be illegal in America. Like Rick Santorum said, contraception is not okay. But the big breakthrough for the We're Against Birth Control folks really came in 2012 when their annual early June protests about how birth control should be illegal started to dovetail with something else that was going on in Republican politics. Their anti-contraception movement started to get embraced by Republicans and conservatives more broadly as part of the ways they wanted to be against Obamacare. They decided to become outraged that insurance regulations, federally, under Obamacare, would specify that contraception is one of the things that has to be covered on people's insurance now. So, vaccinations, cancer screenings, there's a whole list of things that have to be included at a minimum in health insurance policies. And under Obamacare, contraception is one of those things. Everybody freak out. Now, at the time that conservatives and Republicans decided to freak out about that, 28 states already had the exact same mandate in state law, which never bothered conservatives at all, not even in those states. But they decided that they were going to become outraged about it being part of Obamacare because the root word of Obamacare is Obama. Do you remember poor Wheaton College in Illinois? Wheaton is an evangelical school. They decided that they would sue the Obama administration over contraception. They said it would be horrendously, religiously offensive to them as a school to offer employees insurance coverage that paid for contraception. If Obamacare wanted them to do that, they would sue. It was so terribly offensive to them on religious terms. The problem was, when that school tried to sue, turns out they were already offering contraception coverage to their employees under their existing policies even before Obamacare went into effect. They'd been offering it for years. It had never bothered them or offended their religious sensibilities before. But they decided now they would say they were outraged by it. The pill kills. Birth control is abortion. We couldn't possibly cover birth control. We've been covering birth control all this time? Seriously? And so something that was never really controversial before, except on the fringes of the anti-abortion movement, became kind of a mainstream conservative and Republican cause. And it wasn't just poor, confused Wheaton College in Illinois suing the federal government because of their newly found religious objections to contraception. It was dozens of lawsuits with dozens of plaintiffs, many of them filing from states that already required insurance plans to cover contraception, but that had never really bothered anybody before. And today, the United States Supreme Court decided to take up a pair of those cases to decide if your boss gets to decide, based on his religious beliefs, whether or not you can get birth control covered by your health insurance. One of the plaintiffs is a chain called the Hobby Lobby, which donates a portion of their profits to the televangelist Oral Roberts University. The Hobby Lobby says that the evangelical Christian conservative religious beliefs of the company's owners mean that they don't want their employees to have access to contraception through their health insurance. Another one of the plaintiffs that the Supreme Court decided to take up the case of today was a Mennonite-owned woodworking business from Pennsylvania. Mennonites are sometimes confused with the Amish, but they are a different sect that shares some religious views about health care, including, in some cases, not believing in health insurance itself altogether. So if your boss is a Mennonite or is an Amish guy who thinks that health insurance itself is wrong, does that mean that you don't get health insurance at work, even if otherwise the law would say you had to? That's what's so fascinating about this case. Because, yes, it is the Rick Santorum, the pill kills folks with their anti-birth control social conservatism. They're an outgrowth of the anti-abortion movement. They think contraception is the same thing as abortion, and they're against them both. If you are against birth control, these folks are your folks. This is Rick Santorum, Ken Cuccinelli, Mike Huckabee, Sam Brownback. These are the folks who put Personhood on the ballot in Mississippi and Colorado and other places. So in which case, if those things pass, yeah, all abortion would be criminalized, all of it. But also the IUD would be criminalized because they consider some forms of birth control to be just exactly the same as abortion. So if you have an IUD, you would be what, a felon? This case goes beyond just that part of social conservatism and Republican politics. This case is so fascinating because it goes to the broader question of what your boss's religion means for you. Because Wheaton College and the Hobby Lobby may not want you as their employee to have access to birth control. But what if your boss isn't hung up on birth control? What if your boss has an objection to cancer treatment or a vaccination for polio? In the 1970s in Greenwich, Connecticut, a whole bunch of kids got polio in the 70s because they were from families that were Christian Scientists and they didn't want to vaccinate their kids for polio. Christian Science parents who treated their son's diabetic shock with prayer instead of insulin, they were found liable in the boy's death along with their church, who advised them on their course of action as their son died and who sent a practitioner to the boy's bedside to pray while he died instead of giving him the insulin shot that would have saved his life. Over the history of the Christian Science Church, dozens of its members have been charged in connection with people's deaths from treatable illnesses, which the faith of Christian Scientists tells them not to treat. Deaths from measles, deaths from asthma, deaths from treatable tumors and cancer. If your boss is a Christian Scientist, should his legitimately held religious beliefs mean that your health insurance shouldn't cover treatment for things that he thinks should only be treated with prayer? Things like measles, asthma, treatable tumors, and cancer. If your boss doesn't believe your kids should be vaccinated against polio, should he be able to stop your health insurance from covering your kids' vaccinations against polio? If your boss is a Jehovah's Witness, should he be able to stop your health insurance from covering the cost of a blood transfusion? If your boss thinks that AIDS is God's punishment from a God who hates the people who he gave it to, and he gave it to him on purpose, then can your boss force a change in your health insurance so it doesn't cover HIV testing? And if you test positive, can he decide that your health insurance will not cover the treatment because God? And why stop at healthcare? What if your boss says it's not just the laws about healthcare that he doesn't want to follow because of his religious beliefs? It's the laws about all kinds of things. This is the lovely, lovely campus of Duquesne University in Pennsylvania. This fall, Duquesne University started making the case that they were not going to recognize their employees' decision to form a union because they are a Catholic institution. And for some reason, that religious affiliation of the institution means that their teachers can't be in a union. They might want to take that up with the new Pope Francis, come to think of it, but that was their case. Our religious beliefs mean we do not have to follow labor law here. And why should it stop there? Presumably, we're about a half step away from somebody declaring that their religious beliefs preclude paying their employees the federal minimum wage or anything else in the law. The fight here in the small sense is about the mainstreaming in the conservative movement of fire and brimstone anti-contraception politics. Anti-contraception politics, where they think that contraception is abortion and abortion is murder and you shouldn't have access to either. That's what it is in the smaller sense. The fight here in the larger sense is about whether you are still entitled to the rights and protections of federal law, even if your boss says that God told him otherwise. Joining us now is Dahlia Lithwick. She's senior editor and legal correspondent at Slate. Dahlia, it's great to have you here in person. Thanks for coming in.
I feel like I've always been the crazy old aunt in your attic in Charlottesville, and I'm really here now. So.
You've always been the crazy aunt in a lovely studio in Charlottesville. It's great to have you here. How do you think the Supreme Court is going to approach this? Do we know anything from the specific cases they chose to bring up or anything else about the way they set this up for themselves that tells us what it's going to be like?
We don't know. I mean, what we know is, as you said in your intro, this is some kind of unholy alliance of, Citizens United and the idea of corporate personhood getting together with the War on Women and getting together with the ACA cases and producing this baby, this ugly, ugly baby that has just threads hanging out of every kind of doctrine. This is about, in a profound way, the First Amendment freedoms of religion, but it's also about the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, right? It's about a statute that was supposed to give teeth to the religious freedom protections in the First Amendment, but it's also about, whether a religion can, a corporation, a for-profit corporation, right? We're not just talking about Catholic universities and about Catholic hospitals. We're talking about for-profit corporations that just make crafts in this case, whether they can have a conscience, a religious conscience. So in a deep way, there is so much going on, and this is going to be a nightmare for the court. And based on the two cases that we saw them take today, and based on the cases that they did not take today, I don't think they can avoid squarely answering this question of, are corporations people too? Not just for speech purposes, right, in the campaign speech context, but are corporations people too when it comes to having religion? And what do you do about the real religions of the real employees? And are they trumped by that corporate person's imaginary religion?
And that corporate person's imaginary religion. It's mind-bending. I mean, my understanding, and you're the lawyer here, not me, but my understanding about the law around religious freedom, especially the Supreme Court precedent here, is essentially that you can have your right to obviously practice your religion protected, but your ability to sort of exempt yourself from things that would otherwise apply to you on the basis of your religion sort of stops at the end of your own skin. You're not able to make those decisions on the basis of your religion that affect other people. You can do things that affect the way things apply to yourself, but when you make that decision for a third party, in this case your employee, that's when things have gone too far, because then you're impinging other people's beliefs.
Right, and the court is clear. I mean, we have lots and lots of precedent that says once you make the decision to enter commerce, your religious personhood has to fall away or fall back a little bit from just basic, neutral, generally applicable laws. You know, otherwise everybody could object to everything, and that doesn't work. So this precedent is clear. What's a little bit interesting here is that you have different corporations in this case, even defining what they consider abortion-causing drugs differently. Right? So you've got the Catholic plaintiffs in these cases saying all birth control is off the table. You've got others saying only the morning after pill. We've got others, as you said, saying, okay, the morning after pill plus IUDs. So even as amongst themselves, they don't even just disagree about religion, they disagree about science, right? They disagree about facts. Do these things cause abortions? The FDA says no.
Right.
But that's not even the issue anymore. So you're not just probing sort of the good faith religious beliefs of these corporations, these for-profit corporations. You're also probing, do they really believe these ideas about science?
Right.
And how does the court even...
And if we have to be completely value neutral in assessing them, why can't a Christian Science boss say, no, the only treatment allowed for cancer under my employees' health coverage will be prayer? Why? I mean, if we're going to say we're agnostic as to the validity of scientific beliefs, if you ascribe them to theology, then why? How can there ever be a regulation about health insurance ever, let alone malpractice?
Well, it really rises in some of the dissents in these cases where they just throw out these slippery slope cases. You know, really stem cell research, really, you know, gay couples that you don't agree about, really, you know, Christian scientists. And there's no answer to that. You have to create a neutral rule. And I don't know how the court creates a neutral rule if the court doesn't want to micromanage religious beliefs and deeply held religious beliefs.
Amazing stuff. I mean, it's going to be amazing to watch this legally. Politically, I will say it is also amazing to see this spring from the anti-contraception movement, which so few people even admit exists, even though it's there in plain sight. Dahlia Lithwick, senior editor and legal correspondent at Slate. It is a real pleasure to have you here in person.
Thank you for having me.
Stick around if you want. There'll be libations at the end of the show. Maybe. Well, I don't want to promise. All right. Big news breaking this afternoon from the Obama administration that could potentially change things a lot for the ideologically motivated billionaires among us. Plus some amazing pictures taken in Iran after the big nuclear deal that I want to show you. And also weather. There's weather. There's weather and weather-related hurly-burly in the skies and on the roads and on the rails tonight. There's a ton still to come up this hour. Stay with us.